Hi, Premier. Pleasure to welcome you to our program. Thanks for making the time.
Well, thanks so much for having me on today, Vashi.
I wanted to start off, Premier, and get a sense from you if you know what Donald Trump wants in order to avoid tariffs.
Well, he just wants us to secure the border, and I don't disagree with him. We should be doing this well before he put this threat out to us on the tariffs. We sat around the table with all the premiers last night, speaking of the Prime Minister, and every premier was very, very clear that we need to tighten up our border and secure it. And that doesn't just apply for Canada. I think it applies for the United States as well.
Can you expand on that? When you say it was, a big part of the discussion, were there assurances provided to you and the other premiers, for example, by the federal government that they're prepared to do a lot more at the border?
Yeah, they assured us. They said they were going to have a plan. We look forward to hearing the plan, and we can't wait a month or 2 months. We have to get a plan extremely quickly, and we'll see what the federal government comes back to us with.
Did they tell you how long before they release that plan or sort of convey it to you? And I ask because you mentioned time, and obviously this threat was made by the incoming president to do on day one, which is less than 2 months away.
That's right. No, they didn't give us an exact time, but I can assure you, as the chair of the Federation, I'll be on to him. I'll be communicating with him, ask him when we're going to see the plan and how quickly we can get one. But what we were saying last night, you have to beef up the RCMP, you have to support the CBSA officers as well. And I'll give you one example. Every year the RCMP, they hire 1,200 police officers. In Ontario alone, we train and recruit over 2,000 and growing constantly. So 2,000 for Ontario versus 1,200 across all of Canada. They need to support the CBSA officers and the RCMP with the tools they need to get the job done.
Let me ask you, the CBSA, the union rather, that represents those border agents has conveyed that they feel like they're 2,000 border agents short of where they should be to patrol what is, the world's longest, essentially, unsecured border, or not unsecured, but, it's a certain open border. Do you support that call? Like, do you think that's the kind of extra resources that the feds are going to have to put on the table?
I believe so. They definitely need over 2,000 more agents. I met with the CBSA and the OPP and the United States Drug Enforcement Agency yesterday, and they were saying they need the resources to make sure that they stop the flow of drugs going back and forth across the border.
Do you feel the feds are seized with the scope of that? And I ask because I've spoken to the Minister of Public Safety, the federal minister. I've asked him about that. He said, oh, well, the CBSA management doesn't think that we need that many more. He was fairly resistant to that call a few weeks ago. Do you think this changes that, or do you think they're seized with the scope of it?
Well, I hope Mr. LeBlanc heard the message yesterday, and he has the conversation with the CBSA. I just had a conversation the other day. They need more resources. RCMP needs more resources. What we've offered to them is that we'll do whatever we can for the OPP on the waterways. Obviously the border is not our jurisdiction, but any way we can stop the flow of drugs going back and forth across the border, we'll be there and contribute any way we can. I know Alberta feels the exact same way. Quebec does as well. We have the resources, and we'll put them where is needed.
Putting the border aside for a second, you and other premiers have spoken about the importance of defense spending, and we know the incoming president cares a lot about that NATO target. Was accelerating the timeline to meet that 2% of GDP on defense spending target, was that part of the conversation with premiers and the Prime Minister?
It was. There was quite a few premiers spoke out. I got to give credit to Premier Canoe. He was very outspoken. He led the charge when last time we got together, and I just want to thank him for that. We're at about, I think it's close to 1.4%. We need to boost that up to 2% to meet our NATO commitment. We can't wait years down the road. We need to do it immediately.
Did the feds, did the Prime Minister, I should be more specific, say that he would do that?
Well, he didn't confirm he was going to do it. He was surprised that we had so much interest in it, but That's the next thing President-elect Trump will say. You need to meet your 2% NATO commitments, and he's right. We need to hit our 2%, and we need to make sure we secure the borders.
I think that the federal government, and certainly in my interviews with them, when you position kind of, are you going to do that? The response is often like it's a trade-off, right? We're looking at $80 billion a year of spending, even if we want to meet that 2032 commitment. Are you, let's say, as Premier of Ontario, a province that is, you know, I think in the year 2024-25, the recipient of $27 billion worth of transfers, willing to give up some of that if it does mean meeting our defense spending goals?
Well, I'll just be clear. We give more money to the federal government than they give back to us. I think it's well over $11 billion more they receive from Ontario than what we receive back. What they need to do is allocate the right amount of spending to protect our country, protect NATO, countries around the world, and make sure that we take care of our men and women serving in our armed forces.
I guess what I wonder, though, is are premiers willing to see, you know, an opportunity cost, essentially? Like, are you willing to get less money from the federal government if it means more going to NATO, or are you okay with a federal deficit that increases quite dramatically in size as an alternative?
Well, I think what they have to do is review all their finances and make sure they set priorities, no matter if it's defense spending or health care or any other area that they're involved in. And that's up to them to make sure that they can balance their books and reduce their debt and so on and so forth. I know where we're at. We're being prudent fiscal managers. We're going to balance by 26, 27. And by the way, we're the only province of BC doesn't have a path to balance. Quebec doesn't, the federal government doesn't, but Ontario has a path to balance.
So are you, I guess what I want to be clear on, though, are premiers all united in your view on pushing the government to accelerate that timeline? And do you think President Trump will use this as another sort of threat moving forward?
Well, I'm not too sure what President Trump's going to make his next move, but I can tell you it was unanimous around the table, and we just need the federal government to step it up and meet their 2% commitment.
Even prior to Donald Trump's threat, you, as the head of the Council of the Federation, had sent a letter to the Prime Minister asking for more clarity, not just on the strategy, but who specifically will be leading that strategy for the federal government. Who do you think should lead it?
Well, it should start right from the top. It should start with the Prime Minister, and then Minister LeBlanc is responsible for that area, and I'm a fan of Minister LeBlanc. He's a good person. He's a good minister. We have a great relationship, and I'm confident he's gonna get it done.
Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the federal Conservatives, has insinuated that Justin Trudeau, because of where his party sits in the polls and his relative lack of strength in popular opinion polling, I guess, compared to the Conservatives, is coming at this from a position of weakness. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I'm not going to get involved in the federal politics between Mr. Poilievre and the Prime Minister. I'm going to let them, they can jump in the ring, battle it out, and see who wins at the end of the day. It's democratic society we live in. Democracy is always going to reign. I always say that people are never wrong, so it's going to be up to the people of Canada to decide who they want to be their next Prime Minister. So
putting aside Mr. Poilievre's characterization, just based on what you observe in the time that Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals are in their mandate, do you think that they can negotiate from a position of strength?
Well, I think strength comes from unity right across the country. With all the premiers, we have to stand as Team Canada. We have to put our political stripes aside and do what's best for everyone in the country, not for one political stripe or the other, because we have multiple political stripes in the Federation.
I have to ask you then, Premier, with all due respect, and just challenge the veracity with which you come at that point, because earlier in the week, your comment on the federal government was that they were stuck on their back foot. Is it helpful to say that publicly when you're trying to deliver a message of unity?
Well, again, when we sit down at the table, we all feel united, and we're there to support the federal government. Should have we done this quite some time ago? 100%. I've mentioned it in the past that our borders were not secured enough. But moving forward, we have to make sure that they're secured. So we'll stand united as a country when we're negotiating as well with the U.S.
Your opposition in the province, though, contends that you're making statements like that or coming out ahead of a lot of different issues, for example, involving Mexico, simply for your own political benefit ahead of an expected early election. How do you respond to that?
Well, something, that's their opinion. They can have their opinion, that's fine. I have my opinion. I'm doing what's best for Ontario, number one. I'm always there, working with all the other premiers to make sure we have a strong country.
Do you think that the type of characterization you employed, for example, around being on their back foot, or Danielle Smith refusing to say that the tariffs or the threat of tariffs are unjustified, do you expect after the meeting with the premiers and the Prime Minister that sort of language will quell down in the name of exactly what you just argued for, unity?
Yeah, I believe so, but we have to get the federal government moving. We have to hold them accountable, and we're going to do that, but we're going to do it collaboratively. We're going to work with them. We're going to support them any way we can to make sure we secure the border.
And just one final question for you, Premier. I read about your ad campaign, and just as I said, you were kind of ahead on a number of different things here. Are you doing any personal outreach to the Trump team, to people, to him himself, people around him? Is there any of that going on?
No, what we're doing, and I think we've seen it over the last year, probably the last couple of years, we've been talking to governors of both political stripes. We've invited senators and congressmen and women. I'm on the phone every single week with them. It's all about building relationships, and it's so important that we build relationships with our strongest ally.
Okay, Premier, I'm going to leave it on that note. I appreciate you making the time very much. Thank you.